Karl Bohnak, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the studio, actually. When was the last time you were here?
It was back in late December. I was sitting right here.
All right.
Doing a report.
A little bit before I got here, but, but welcome back. That's kind of leads to my first question is, used to be a meteorologist, now you're throwing your hat in the ring for, this position. So why did you decide to do that?
Well, first of all, I'm still a meteorologist.
Yeah,
I
sure,
love the weather,
right.
and I still work on meteorology. On the East End, I do radio stations in Newbury and Sault Ste. Marie.
Okay.
So,
just not for WZMQ.
not for WZMQ. Anyway, I decided to hop in and throw my hat in the ring because, I think the state needs a change in direction. That's why I'm running. There's a number of things. Of course, energy costs are something that's on everybody's mind, and just the cost of everything. But energy is really something, and my opponent and Lansing has made decisions that will adversely affect our quality of life, I believe, because of the energy situation. We have our Attorney General who is actually trying to close down Line 5, and we need Line 5 here in the Upper Peninsula. For instance, just at Rapid River alone, there is 32 million gallons of propane produced each year that goes to over 20,000 homes and businesses in the Upper Peninsula. So we need Line 5. Then there was energy legislation that was passed just about a year ago, and my opponent was the deciding vote on legislation that mandates that we power our grid with green renewable energy. And that means mainly wind and solar here in the Upper Peninsula. And that means that we'd be relying on intermittent weather-dependent energy to power our grid. Electricity is to modern civilization what blood is to the human body. We need a constant flow, and we can't guarantee that with renewables. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to jump in and put my hat in the ring.
Sure, and that bill you're talking about includes the goal of reaching 100% renewable energy by 2040, correct? So do you think that is a realistic goal, you think?
I do not think that is a realistic goal. And here's another thing. In that legislation, townships are the foundation of our constitutional republic. And that legislation cut out the legs from the townships. In other words, they will have no decision as to where these large wind and solar projects will go. It'll be all decided by unelected bureaucrats in Lansing. And that's another reason why I think that we need a change.
Sure. Let's move on to the housing situation as well. As we all know, it's tough to find places to live. So how do we go about making more places available and making it affordable as well?
Right. We need more housing, and I know that there's some projects in the works that hopefully will help to alleviate that situation. We need to make sure that, at least on our end, we don't have a lot of mandates. For instance, one of the things that Lansing has proposed, and as far as I know, it's not legislation yet, has proposed is that all new construction has to have sprinkler systems inside their homes, even residential areas. And what that would do is just raise the cost astronomically. So that's one thing that we can do. We can kind of cut down on regulations. As far as the cost of building materials, that's another story. And but we need to at least get away from some of the regulations on Lansing's end. And if I'm elected, I will work with my fellow legislators to make sure that that's the case.
Sure, and speaking with Jen Hill yesterday, we were talking about proposals that would give, tax credits for first-time home buyers. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think that's all well and good. However, what that will tend to do is just raise the cost of homes to begin with. And then we're right back in the same spot we were. So I would be cautious with a proposal like that, to be honest with you.
Let's move on to childcare now. A similar situation to housing. There's not enough places for people to be able to drop off their kids and have them looked after while they go about their own business and provide. So how would you go about servicing the UP and making sure we have enough people to take care of kids when the families are away.
You know, I would have to say that in my situation, I have not really talked to too many people as far as childcare goes. If I'm elected, what I am going to do is do a tour, and I'm going to talk to people and see what they need. And see, for instance, I would go to places like little toddlers, you know, where they have childcare, and find out what sort of problems they have, what they need on their end, and hopefully we can come up with some solutions. Maybe it is a tax credit or something like that, at least on the state side. But that's something that I would really have to learn more about, to be honest with you.
Sure. Sure. Actually, I do want to swing back, Karl, talking about these renewable energy goals for the state. What do you think the role humans are playing when it comes to climate change, if any, and how would you go about?
Well, of course, I'm a
that?
climate denier. You've seen that. I am not a climate denier. At one time, we had over a mile of ice over us, and that was certainly climate change on a long-term scale. I am not a climate denier because now climate change means human-induced climate change. I do believe that humans do have an effect on the climate. The question is how much. I do not believe that we have our finger, human beings have our finger on the Earth's thermostat, that we can actually adjust it up or down. I do not believe that. I believe that there are other factors that really outweigh humans' effect on the climate. But again, we do have some effect. I do not think that it's a catastrophic situation that we need to implode our economy and burden families and businesses. And that's what we're doing with this legislation. We're burdening families and businesses by mandating that we redo our whole infrastructure and blight the landscape here in the Upper Peninsula. And then the question I would have is, what do we do with the solar panels once their useful lifetime is through? You can't just recycle them. You can't just bury them in landfills because there are some toxic metallic compounds in them. So what do you do with them? And then, for instance, the wind turbines, the blades, those are not recyclable. You take those off, and I saw a story where there's a spot in Sweetwater, Texas, because they've had a huge build out of wind turbines. They have over 30 acres of these turbine blades that are piled as high as basketball backboards. And so what are you going to do with all that stuff? Somebody came up to me and said, oh yeah, we can chop it up and put it into concrete. Well, that takes energy too. And if we're going for net zero, that's just spinning our wheels. We're not getting any really return on our investment as far as clean energy goes with something like that. So I am really against, let's put it this way. I think there is a place for renewable energy, for instance, wind turbines and solar panels on a limited basis, maybe where people can't actually get power from the grid. That's a possibility, but to say that we're going to power our grid with weather-dependent intermittent energy is just ludicrous. Because, for instance, China has over 1 billion people, India too, and while they are building out some renewable energy, most of their energy is coming from fuel-based to power their grid. And so the actions that we take on climate will do nothing. It's ridiculous. It's all pain and no gain.
Are there any actions or is there anything you would support when it comes to cleaner energy, renewable energy?
Well, one thing that is being brought up now, and it's still, I think, a ways away. It's actually nuclear and small reactors. There's something called small modular reactors. I don't know how far that is away, but we need to look at environmental factors when it comes to energy, but we also have to balance that out with costs for families and businesses. That cannot be ignored because we all want to still remain here in the Upper Peninsula and, the state of Michigan. We care about our state, and we can't go off on this track and then all of a sudden price ourselves out of the market so that businesses leave. So that's a real concern of mine.
Sure. Let's move on to another big topic that a lot of Americans are paying attention to: their elected leaders, abortion rights. Where do you stand on abortion right now?
Well, I believe in a culture that where we have the kind of state where it's easy to live, work, and raise a family. And while I am personally pro-life, I can't imagine what it's like for a woman to have an unwanted pregnancy. It has to be overwhelming. And as you know, here in the state of Michigan, people have spoken in the 2022 election. Abortion is legal. A woman can receive an abortion for any reason at any time in her pregnancy. And there's nothing that the state legislature can do about that. There is nothing, if I am elected, that I can do to change that reality. So while I believe that women, if they truly have a choice, they should be given every opportunity to choose life. And that means we need to support her in that decision, and also support programs like, for instance, I'm going to a dinner tonight, it's called the Care Clinic, where they actually are working on the private end to support women who are pregnant. Things like better access to prenatal care and early childhood development.
So it's fair to say that you support the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, bring it back to the states?
Well, that's the foundation, again, of our constitutional republic. So I do support that, yes.
All right. I do want to move on to gun laws as well. We've seen some changes, in recent times. People looking for more accountability for things like parents when it comes to keeping their firearms safe. What do you make of the current situation with guns right now?
Well, we have red flag law now in the state of Michigan, and one thing I feel about that, it's potential for abuse and a slippery slope. Let's say there's a couple that has some conflict, and there could be something where, let's say there's a veteran with PTSD. That person could be flagged, and then their due process is gone. They have to actually defend themselves, and they're considered guilty, and they have to go before a judge and try to prove their innocence. So I think that the whole concept of a red flag law is a slippery slope. Then there's more and more, let's say, rules and restrictions on gun owners and people that want to transfer their firearms. At one time it was just handguns, now it's actually long rifles. And I don't know all the ins and outs, but I do know that it's just more paperwork where even if, let's say, a father wanted to bequeath or give a gun to, let's say, a son, they'd have to go through an authorized gun dealer now, like a long rifle, to do all the paperwork. So, that I believe is something that is kind of onerous to have to go through all those regulations. I do believe, for instance, storage of guns, that should be just common sense. People should just do that. And I assume that most people have common sense that if they do have firearms, that they are going to store them safely. I don't think that the state should be going into people's houses and inspecting their property to see if they are actually storing them safely. And that would be the extreme of that issue.
Sure, and that kind of brings me back to our previous topic, the abortion rights. Your opponent, Jen Hill, would argue that no doctors should, or no government entity should be going into a person's doctor office, and that's a common argument you hear from Democrats as well. So what's your response to that?
What do you mean? I don't understand. The patient doctor relationship is protected by HIPAA laws. So that's a non-issue as far as I'm concerned.
All right, let's move on. We're getting closer to the end of our questions here, Karl. Tell me what most separates you from your opponent, Jen Hill, would you say?
Well, I am willing to work with my fellow UP legislators. And that's been a tradition. We can go back when, for instance, the 109th has traditionally been Democrat, but the representative in the 109th has consistently worked with the rest of the UP legislators, which oftentimes they've been Republican. It didn't matter the party, but they would work together. That did not happen in this last legislative session. My opponent did not work with the rest of the UP legislators. And that's one thing that I want to do. I want to make sure that our voice is amplified because we have a small voice here. We only have 3% of the population, 29% of the landmass, but only 3% of the population. I want to make sure that our peninsula and our values are properly represented.
Sure. And in closing too, Karl, what are your top goals for the areas of the UP you're covering?
Okay, well, number one, I want to keep our energy costs under control as much as possible. And I know we don't have the ability to regulate them. That goes beyond our purview. But if we can even amend some of this legislation that was passed, I think it would be great. And, you know, I have a lot to learn. And I'm going to commit myself to doing a tour and finding out what businesses need, what just general households need. I've been going to a lot of doors and talking to people, and I know, like you mentioned, costs are really out of control, people's pocketbooks, also housing, and ultimately energy costs. That's a big, big deal. We have to keep those under control.
Sure. Anything else you'd like to say to our viewers, Karl, before we end?
I urge you to get out and vote and check out my website, votebohnak.com, vote, BOHNAK.com. And if you agree with where I stand, I'd appreciate your vote.
All right. Karl, thanks so much for coming in today. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
All right.